Most USSA races are open. That is, all valid members of the host division can compete. However, as an athlete progresses in ski racing, she will have the opportunity to qualify for regional competitions, such as the U14 Tri-Divisional Championship that brings together the best U14 athletes from the Intermountain, Northern, and Alaska divisions from the USSA's Western region. Likewise, older athletes have the opportunity to compete in regional and national championships. The process of selecting divisional and regional athletes to compete in such competitions is known as the selection board process. The purpose of this video is to introduce the basic concepts that underpin the selection board methodology. The selection board process will vary somewhat by race series. However, it's important to understand that the process isn't arbitrary. The selection methodology is specified well in advance. The divisional and regional managers have no discretion when it comes to preparing selection boards, and divisional and regional alpine competition committees have limited discretion when it comes to selecting team members. For example, for a divisional team of 5 members, the divisional ACC may have the discretion to name just one of the 5 team members, which is an option they tend to exercise cautiously. Before an athlete can be considered for a selection board, she needs to meet some basic requirements. For starters, she has to have an appropriate paid-up USSA membership. In addition, the Northern Division requires that all U14 and older athletes file liability waiver, financial, and team agreements by December 1st in order to be eligible for divisional selection boards. Furthermore, athletes must meet the minimum number of starts in designated qualifiers in order to be eligible for selection boards. For example, this might be at least 1 start in each of a series of slalom, giant slalom, and Super G qualifiers. The specifics are determined in advance by level and by race series, and qualifiers are designated by the relevant ACC prior to the start of the season. The selection board method is difficult to explain conversationally. Furthermore, there are several variations of the basic methodology. Nevertheless, the underlying concept is straightforward and easy to demonstrate. The bottom line is, consistently place well in multiple disciplines at qualifying races, and your chances of being selected for a team goes up. Here's a hypothetical example. Assume that this is how athletes X, Y, and Z placed at 3, let's say, slalom qualifiers. In order to determine rankings for purposes of the selection board, athletes' finishes are assigned points according to a specific schedule. Here's an example of a schedule often referred to as the old World Cup point system. This point schedule rewards athletes who finish in the top 15, and it rewards podium finishes disproportionately. So, here's how the old World Cup ranking points are applied to the finishes of our 3 athletes. Sometimes an athlete's ranking points are derived from a subset of the total number of her finishes and qualifiers. The best 2 out of 3 results, for example. Note that although athlete Z had a DNF in one of the 3 qualifiers, she was still ranked 2nd overall within the discipline due to the fact that she was on the podium twice. This kind of scoring system rewards risk-taking and podium finishes, although consistent but lower placing racers like athlete Y can also earn a relatively high ranking. So let's look at an example of a basic selection board for a championship series that includes slalom, giant slalom, and Super G races. This is generally descriptive of the process for a U14 championship, for example. First, we would rank athletes by discipline using the procedure we just discussed. The result is the World Cup points board shown here. Note this example is fictitious, but it is derived from actual USSA competition data. The slalom rankings derived from the qualifiers are athletes I, O, Y, M, and J. The giant slalom rankings are I, R, M, J, Y, and the Super G rankings are from 1st to 5th, N, Y, R, I, and athlete M. So, if the divisional quota was 5 team members, the selections would be I, the top-ranked competitor in slalom and GS, followed by N, the top-ranked competitor in Super G, then O, R, and Y. Athletes M and J would be the first and second alternates, respectively. Similarly, a 4-event, 8-person team based on World Cup-style points board would include A, B, E, D, G, Q, R, and Z in this example. Note that some regions, including the Western region, use a 2-board selection method in which the World Cup-style points board is augmented with a board derived from seed point standing. An 8-person team using the regional selection board method would consist of athletes A, B, E, D, X, C, G, and Q. In our example, the use of the two-board method versus the one-board method results in the replacement of athletes R and Z with athletes X and C. In this case, X and C had the lowest overall slalom and Super G points in the field, but didn't have finishes and qualifiers that placed them toward the top of the World Cup points board. A possible explanation could be that athletes X and C were very strong discipline specialists, but happened to be injured during the discipline qualifiers. The selection board process may initially appear mysterious. However, it's based predominantly on simple math and objective, publicly available information. So before you call your divisional manager in March, check out the USSA documentation in order to understand the precise method being used to make selections for the race series in which you are interested.